Not only that, for a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
MyPillow.com.
Good evening, everybody. Haitian immigrants are fleeing a gang-ravaged island nation, and they're reportedly on their way to the state of Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis trying to combat the illegal alien invasion by sending state law enforcement to the Florida Keys and South Florida. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has a new strategy to deal with the impending Haitian invasion. According to an unnamed U.S. official, the White House is now planning to use Guantanamo Bay as a staging ground to, quote unquote, accept and process Haitian immigrants. The problem is they're not immigrants. They're illegal aliens, and they're entering the state of Florida illegally. Guantanamo is just 200 miles from Haiti. It's been used by the Coast Guard as a facility for aliens over the decades. The problem now is, with Biden at the helm, there's no guarantee that those aliens will actually be kept there. Biden has spent his entire presidency facilitating the invasion of millions of illegal aliens into this country, an estimated 14 million over the course of his first 3 years in office. The Biden regime even created a fast-track program for entry into the United States called the Parole Program for Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. The program has allowed hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens from these countries to enter the United States and to obtain work permits and other documentation. How long before Biden expands that program to include any Haitian who wants to flee the island? The country has essentially already collapsed. Even the corrupt globalist United Nations is admitting that gangs control 80% of the capital city, Port-au-Prince. Of course, Biden can't be trusted to solve a problem. He creates them. He will only use a problem for his own political gain. And from now until the election, we can fully expect Joe Biden to encourage the surge of more illegal aliens into the United States. Biden told reporters on Air Force One yesterday that he will not take executive action on the border. Instead, he's, quote, counting on the border action happening by itself, end quote. Counting on the border action happening by itself, whatever he thinks that means. He thinks the problem, well, it may not solve itself, but then it doesn't need solving in his mind. This comes as new evidence shows President Biden and his family sold out our nation for a paycheck, not for the first time. According to House Republican investigators, Hunter Biden and his partners tried to help a Chinese energy company, CEFC, quietly buy an innovative United States nuclear energy company trying to control the global market. The company is Westinghouse, the premier maker of U.S. nuclear reactors. Imagine if Communist China had gotten their hands on that company. That is exactly what they tried to do, and the Biden family tried to help in every way they could. Luckily, Biden and his partners were unsuccessful in completing that acquisition. But the attempt is still harrowing. The Bidens were still helpful to the CEFC, the CCP-linked company that paid the Bidens nearly $5 million over a 14-month period after Joe Biden had left office. House investigators uncovered a detailed strategy memo that shows Hunter directly involved in emails and correspondence trying to move the project ahead. James Gilliar, Hunter's partner, wrote this, quote, "In summary, Utilizing the U.S. face of Westinghouse combined with the economic power of CEFC is the perfect solution to control this global sector. End quote. Can you say harrowing? That was in 2016 when Joe Biden was the sitting vice president of the United States. So here we have a vice president's son trying to sell the United States out to China. And yet, no accountability, and no accountability to this very day. The U.S. Justice Department is nowhere to be found. It is under the control of Merrick Garland, who is under the thumb of President Biden. So let's bring in Just the News founder, host John Solomon, and chief editor. John, first of all, extraordinary reporting, and thank you so much for doing all of the wonderful journalistic work that you do. This story sends shivers down most of us our backs because think what could have possibly been.
Yeah, listen, this is clearly an effort by China to use a prominent Biden family member or members to take from the United States what we spent a lot of money and a lot of innovation on. Westinghouse is one of the revolutionary makers of reactors. They've made the AP1000, which is the new reactor that has revolutionized the world when it comes to nuclear energy. Much smaller footprint, much higher output, much safer. And people are very excited that this was developed. China wanted its hands on it. Now, let me tell you something that we're going to break tomorrow that will advance this story. You're going to get it early tonight. We now know that the Justice Department caught the Chinese military trying to hack into Westinghouse about 18 months before Hunter Biden got into the picture. So China is trying to hack into Westinghouse to get the plans for this incredible nuclear reactor. They get caught. Eric Holder, the Obama Attorney General, charges the military. First time a foreign military was charged with a hacking offense. And then not 18 months later, China's switching gears. All right, we got caught doing it the hacking way. We'll try to use the influence peddling way. Let's go get Hunter Biden and his partners and try to make this deal happen. A son of a sitting vice president, just as you so articulately said, tried to help China take our most precious nuclear reactor technology, the newest innovation in the world, and transfer it in the form of a sale. By the way, the sale wasn't going to be overt. They were going to try to structure it through cutouts so that it wasn't going to be obvious that China was the ultimate owner. So there's some surreptitiousness to this. And they state in their own documents, as you read from James Gallar's memo, they knew that if they facilitated this, China would have global control of the nuclear energy market. They would have a monopoly, and America, which developed the technology, would suddenly be at a disadvantage. That's what Hunter Biden and his partners were willing to do for good old-fashioned cash.
And we now know this because of both your intrepid reporting and the investigative work of the congressional investigating committees.
Yeah.
At the same time, just to put this in some context, we were watching the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, turning over 20% of North American uranium assets to Russia. This was an Obama, it looks to me like a rummage sale with the most advanced technology in the country.
Yeah, it's certainly an influence peddling sale. You're right. This was part of the theme of my book a few years ago called Fallout, because it was so obvious to me that Democratic elitists in the government of Barack Obama were trying to get rich on by selling nuclear energy, nuclear technology to our greatest adversaries in the world. It started in 2009 and 2010 with Uranium One and other purchases that they were selling to Russia's main nuclear company called Rosatom. And Rosatom set up a U.S. entity, and all of a sudden, Hillary Clinton and her team and others are trying to help them make this purchase. And Bill Clinton gets a $500,000 paycheck and millions of dollars flow to the Clinton Foundation. Fast forward a few years, all right, Russia fell out of favor because they invaded Ukraine the first time under the Obama-Biden watch, and they flipped to China. There's Hunter Biden trying to do many things to help China. He's trying to help China buy natural gas from under our feet, our natural gas resources, and send it over to China. He's trying to help them get the technology for fracking that China isn't as good as America has. And then this new development, which I think surprised a lot of people, the effort to find a way to sell Westinghouse through some discrete mechanism so that China would own that technology and the rest of the world would be dependent on China. The Democrats were working with our largest geopolitical adversaries to sell out this country and help them, our adversaries, become stronger in the global energy markets.
And where does this story, as big as it is, where does it fit now in the Biden corruption story and the investigations by the congressional committees?
There was a major development this afternoon, and I'm still trying to absorb its significance. But this afternoon, James Comer, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, one of the co-chairs of the impeachment inquiry, along with Jim Jordan, they've done all this work. They've done all this gumshoe work to dig it up. Right. They announced that they are beginning a significant investigation into China's infiltration of the United States, the sort of thing that the House Intelligence Committee should have done a long time ago, but Mike Turner hasn't done it. Well, James Comer has stepped into the void. I think there's a link from that investigation into what we're disclosing now and maybe some other things. And here's a big question. It is almost impossible to think that the United States, which had Hunter Biden's business partner in China on a FISA warrant, Patrick Ho, for many years, it's almost inconceivable that the CIA and the FBI did not know that Hunter Biden was engaged in this level of conduct. That begs a big question. Did Joe Biden get a defensive briefing? Did they go to Joe Biden and say, sir, your son is trying to help transfer very valuable technology? If they didn't, it's a major intelligence failure of the CIA. If they did, it means that Joe Biden was helping and facilitating and creating cover for his son to carry out these sort of influence peddling schemes across the world. That's the next question that Comer, Jordan, Jason Smith and others have to get to the bottom of. If Joe Biden was briefed on his son's activities and warned about him, and he allowed him to go on, that could escalate the impeachment inquiry by a big major. And of course, the without question, the hostility of the intelligence community toward President Donald Trump suggests some of the answers to those questions, certainly. John Solomon, as always, we thank you for all you do for the country and terrific journalism once again. Thanks so much. Thank you, sir.
John
Good to be
Solomon,
with you.
the founder and the chief editor of Just the News. Well, turning now from that blockbuster to Speaker Mike Johnson. Johnson is publicly pumping the brakes on any Biden impeachment. I would have to say his timing is not the best. What do you think? You have to wonder which party at times Mike Johnson is really working for, because he is not an entirely deep thinker on the body politic, nor on Capitol Hill goings on. Here is what Speaker Johnson told reporters just outside a recent House Republican retreat, if you can believe it. Quote, "To be very frank with you, because I've been so busy with all my other responsibilities, I have not been able to take the deep dive in the evidence," end quote. We're talking about the impeachment of the President of the United States, and this man hasn't had time to take a deep dive? This man was elected to lead House Republicans. Johnson is, by definition, as Speaker of the House, the most powerfully elected Republican in the country. He's number 3 on the constitutional succession. He is second in line to the presidency, and yet he's been too busy to investigate what is the greatest political corruption scandal in our history. Ladies and gentlemen, if you detect a slight anger in my voice, forgive me. I wasn't successful in keeping it from you. Joe Biden selling influence as vice president of the United States, compromised by China, and Mike Johnson can't find time to look into it, to take a deep dive. What would it take for him to take a deep dive? Did he not notice that he has 3 investigating committees working full time around the clock to do just that? Mike Johnson, who are you and what are you? That's the question tonight. Coming up next, new evidence shows the CIA was present at the Capitol on January 6. Darren Beatty of Revolver News joins us with that shocking new development. Also, the U.S. military is collapsing, as Russia and China emerge stronger than ever around the world. That's straight ahead. Please stay with us.
Looks like you've been sleeping well,
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
and you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0. When I invented My Pillow, it had everything you'd ever want in a pillow. Well, now there's new technology that makes it even better. My Pillow 2.0 has my patented fill combined with a cooling fabric with temperature regulating thread. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
Now's the time to go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use the promo code to save 50% on your My Pillow 2.0. Not only that, for a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better,
And cooler, too.
and you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
mypillow.com.
Welcome back, and a lot happening this evening. The CIA deployed dog teams and bomb technicians to Washington, D.C. on January 6. We know that now because of Judicial Watch. The government watchdog had to fight for those records from the ATF through the Freedom of Information Act. And a lot of questions remain unanswered about the official January 6 pipe bomb story, or stories if you prefer. The agents of the federal regime have been ruthlessly effective at catching everyone who so much as set foot in the U.S. Capitol. But the one individual they cannot find, it seems, is the person or persons who allegedly tried to bomb the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee. That should strike all of us as more than passing odd. No one has dug deeper into the Biden regime's involvement on January 6 than Revolver News founder Darren Beattie. And Darren is our guest here tonight. Darren, thanks for being with us. Let's start with the mysterious inability of these agencies, in particular ATF, to find the person or persons who set those bombs down. Your thinking?
Well, indeed, it is mysterious. And of course, this is the subject of comprehensive reporting on our part that unfortunately would take probably at least 40 minutes to get into the full scope of the story. Suffice it to say here that there's a DNC planted bomb, there's an RNC planted bomb. We've proved that the surveillance footage, which ultimately comes from the DNC, was doctored. We've proved that the FBI is withholding footage that would be critical to confirming their official story. But the big smoking gun with respect to the pipe bombs, and again, I think we've spoken about this before, the scandalous video of Kamala Harris's Secret Service detail being informed of the DNC pipe bomb and clearly knowing that it was fake because they just stood around, they let children walk right by it. And of course, the interesting fact that Kamala Harris, despite all of her political interest, has covered up the fact that she was in the DNC when the pipe bomb was there. You would think she would be milking it for all it's worth because they're making January 6th into this big terrorist event, and yet the vice president-elect, Kamala Harris, came within a hair's width, ostensibly, of losing her life to this pipe bomb. Why would she cover up the fact that she was in the DNC? Why does her Secret Service detail know that the DNC bomb was fake? How do we explain the fact that the RNC and the DNC bombs, respectively, were sitting in their locations for 16 to 17 hours, only to be discovered within a 15-minute window that perfectly coincided with the Fed-infiltrated initial breach of the Western Capitol, in which Ray Epps was, of course, prominently involved? All of these questions we unpacked comprehensively in previous reporting. This latest instance that we see will help to advance the narrative considerably and actually gets ahead of where I'm going in a number of forthcoming major pieces on the pipe bomb. And I'd like to draw attention to a couple things. First is
Sure.
on the agency and institutional level. I think people typically think of the FBI in relation to the January 6th Fedsurrection. After all, it was the head of the Washington field office, Stephen D'Antuono, was the public face of the pipe bomb investigation until he retired as a result of our reporting. It was the FBI that's now known to have tons of informants throughout the various militia groups imputed to January 6th, some of whom were actually texting their handlers as the event unfolded itself within the Capitol. So we typically associate the FBI, and I think the FBI has become a kind of convenient shorthand simply for the rather amorphous term Fed. It functions as a colloquial term, but there are other agencies involved. And I think the final stages of the pipe bomb story, which are very close to wrapping up definitively, will introduce additional agencies. It will introduce agencies of local law enforcement, so MPD, Metro PD of DC. It will introduce the Capitol Police. And here we see it will introduce the ATF. Now, the ATF has a storied and controversial history for its involvement in a wide range of government flag operations, but again, that's outside of the scope of our discussion here. Suffice it to say, it's clear from these FOIA documents, valiantly obtained by Judicial Watch, that the ATF was a major responder to the events of January 6th, and specifically to the pipe bomb incidents. A specific individual, Ashen Benedict, who will become better and better known as the story reaches its final stages. He's got an interesting resume. He was Metro P. He was first ATF, then Metro PD, and now he's deputy at the Capitol Police. A very interesting figure, and I'll simply leave it for that for now. But in the text message exchanges revealed in the FOIA documents, one thing, as you pointed out in your introduction, the CIA bomb squad was there to address the pipe bombs. How interesting. Of all ages, why call the CIA bomb squad? Especially because it was such a flagrant failure when you look at it on the surface. The DNC pipe bomb had been sitting out there for 17 hours. We have surveillance footage of 2 rounds of canine dogs coming to sniff the area. Somehow they managed to miss the bombs. What, did the CIA dogs have COVID that day and they couldn't smell the explosive devices? So the CIA's involvement in this already extremely vexed operation is interesting indeed. And also we see from the text messages possible complications on the timeline, possible complications in relation to the DNC bomb being reported before it was actually discovered, as evidenced by the recently released video. And additionally, you see evidence of confusion as to how many bombs there were, which actually makes a lot of sense. You find one near the RNC, you find one near the DNC. It's natural to assume that there will be more bombs, and that is reflected in the Intel group chat reflected in FOIA. The only problem is, for the actual discovery of the bombs, it doesn't make any sense that they would find the first bomb near the RNC. They would immediately assume, for whatever reason, that the next bomb is going to be at the DNC. Keep in mind, this was sitting out there for 17 hours. It's found 15 minutes after the first one is found. The parallelism between the RNC and the DNC is a retroactive fiction. The RNC pipe bomb was actually discovered by the Capitol Hill Club. There's no reason you would assume, finding a bomb at the Capitol Hill Club, that there's going to be another one and it's going to be at the DNC. And for that matter, when they actually did find the bomb at the DNC, the people who found it were actually interrogated by certain members of Congress and other staff, and answered that they didn't bother to look for a third bomb. So the people who actually found the pipe bomb at the DNC under extraordinarily suspicious and implausibly coincidental circumstances, they, for whatever reason, can't explain why they magically knew to go to the DNC 15 minutes later, and why they magically knew not to look for a third bomb. Whereas in the text chain that we see at FOIA, through the FOIA request, there there's complete chaos. They're wondering, oh, is there a bomb here? Oh, no, that's false. Oh, we think there's a bomb here. Oh, no, there's not. So if these people are confused, how do the people who miraculously found these bombs in perfectly synchronized timing to the unfolding attack on the Capitol know that there would be one by the Capitol Hill Club, there would be one by the DNC, and that would be it? So I think it really helps to emphasize and underscore and intensify the suspicion surrounding the already extremely implausible circumstances of how these two pipe bombs were found.
There is that implausibility. There is that role for the ATF. The now overriding concern is, how in the world did the CIA get involved at all? As we wrap up here, Darren, a very quick brush at what the CIA was doing?
Well, that's a great question. And I don't know whether the CIA's involvement in such circumstances would be routine or not. They use their bomb sniffing detail. I'm actually much more focused on the ATF here because of this specific individual, Ashton Benedict, about whom more in due course. So stay tuned at revolver.news. We've got some really wild stuff coming up. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just simply bizarre that the CIA would be brought into this in the first place. But if it were simply that they had great capabilities and they found the bomb in advance, that would be one thing. But keep in mind, the DNC pipe bombs were sitting out there for 17 hours undiscovered by anyone, undiscovered by the first round of Secret Service agents, undiscovered by 2 rounds of canine dogs, and then miraculously found by some Capitol police officer 15 minutes after the bombs were found at the RNC. And then somehow the CIA bomb sniffing dogs are introduced and the CIA bomb squad. And one other detail I'd like to remind your audience from the explosive video footage released thanks to the persistent efforts of Congressman Massey, we saw that Kamala Harris's Secret Service detail clearly knew that the DNC bomb was fake. They stand around it, they let kids walk by it. But after they all leave, they go through the spectacle of getting a bomb-safe robot to dismantle this bomb. Was that provided to them from the CIA? Was the CIA involved in that spectacle? Did the ATF agents bring in the CIA because that would trigger some kind of higher security threshold that would make it harder to discover what was actually going on in terms of the response? I don't know, but it certainly is strange to add the CIA to the mix of this already extremely suspicious story.
Well, Darren, one thing is for certain. We have ourselves a cliffhanger thanks to you. Well, more than a cliffhanger. We have a series of cliffhangers, and we are delighted to have a part in it all and can't wait for your next installment. Darren Beatty, Revolver News, an extraordinary report, and as I said, cliffhanger as well. Thanks so much, Darren. Turning now to some other headlines, a very bad week for Boeing. Boeing stock tanking as the aerospace giant continues to face more incidents that involve basically the structure of aircraft. Repeatedly, a Boeing 777 plane had to make an emergency landing after the pilot reported a possible mechanical issue. That's becoming rather customary, isn't it? American Airlines hasn't provided any more details than that. And this is now the 6th known incident involving a Boeing aircraft over the past week. Monday, another Boeing 777 was forced to land on its way to California because of a fuel leak. Meanwhile, some travelers flying into Miami International Airport now are being asked to get nose swabs for contagious diseases. Read COVID-19. It's voluntary, of course, but no less annoying. Perhaps a greater priority than probing nostrils should be ensuring that planes stay in the air and arrive on time. Let's call it totalitarianism, but perhaps more efficacious in terms of preserving safety. Coming up, America is a nation in trouble, if you hadn't noticed, and our military is falling apart. while Joe Biden does nothing about it, actually does worse than nothing. He's actually cutting back defense spending. He's playing nice with the most murderous regimes on the planet at the very same time. And join us each and every day, 7 days a week for my podcast, The Great America Show, available at LouDobbs.com. Wherever you get your podcast, we are there. And Joe Biden, well, he is funding the militaries of our enemies, and we take that up here next. Stay with us.
To celebrate the new year, we're having the biggest sale ever on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save 60% on our Goose Down comforters, the best comforters ever. They go perfectly with our MyPillow bed sheets and duvet covers. Save 25% on our brand new kitchen towels. They're made with the same technology as our famous My Towels. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. Our seasonal flannel sheets are finally in. You save up to 50%, and they sell out fast every year, so order now. They're truly the best flannel sheets you'll ever sleep on. Or save up to 80% on all our clearance items. And this is where it gets even better. For a limited time, your entire order ships absolutely free. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use that promo code to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. And for a limited time, your order ships absolutely free.
Welcome back. Joe Biden is funding the militaries of our enemies while kneecapping our own. Billions of our dollars have flowed to Iran under Joe's watch, if you can call it a watch. The worst sponsor of global terrorism has received pallets of cash while its proxies kill American troops. The Trump administration sanctioned these monsters. He showed them the stick and told them he wasn't afraid to use it, and he did. Biden, by contrast, has not only waived sanctions, he's subsidized Iran's reign of terror. There's the irony. Trump is regularly accused of being cozy with autocrats, but Biden is quite literally paying autocrats to murder Americans. Meanwhile, the U.S. military is falling apart, literally. We started this year with the smallest active duty military since 1940. The Department of Defense said military services missed recruiting goals by 41,000 during the 2023 fiscal year. By 41,000. Army, Navy, Air Force, every branch is starving for recruits. Worse still, supporting the war in Ukraine has depleted our national defense stockpile. So what is Joe Biden doing? He's cutting funding to the armed forces. To be sure, Biden is still spending as if there's no tomorrow. He's just not spending big on America's military. Biden's new defense spending plan is something you would expect from a peacetime president. Does the world seem to you to be at peace? That's not to say America should operate as a global police force, far from it. We learned hard lessons from that mistake. Turning now to the collapsing persecutions of Donald Trump. Corrupt Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis is on the verge of being removed from the case. Judge Scott McAfee is expected to rule by tomorrow on whether Willis and her lead prosecutor should be removed from the case. Even if McAfee keeps Willis on, Republicans in Georgia have just passed a law that would allow the state government to remove and to discipline prosecutors for the first time. So Georgia Governor Brian Kemp now has the power to hold Willis to account, and he says he will. Kemp told reporters that the new law will, quote, help us ensure rogue and incompetent prosecutors are held accountable. It's not just the Georgia case that's collapsing either. We told you earlier this week about a major claim held up by the January 6th committee that Trump tried to physically commandeer a Secret Service vehicle, and that ended up being an absolute and total lie. The lie was pushed by a woman named Cassidy Hutchinson, who has been celebrated in the Marxist national media for turning on President Trump. House Republicans recently uncovered testimony from President Trump's driver that contradicted Hutchinson's narrative entirely. It's not necessarily a surprise that Hutchinson lied, but the question is why? What did she receive in exchange? Well, our next guest has an idea. CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp says Cassidy Hutchinson asked CPAC to pay her legal bills. But Schlapp says after CPAC denied her request, Hutchinson curiously received a new source of income from a left-wing book deal that trashed President Trump. So joining us now to take all of this up and to explain more is CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp. Matt, great to have you with us. First, I'm surprised that she would have asked you to foot her legal bills. How did that come to be?
Well, you know, part of CPAC's mission was to try to take those who don't have wealth or power, but were being politically persecuted at the beginning of the Biden administration, and try to help them. And Mercy and I know what this is like.
Right.
Obviously, Donald Trump knows what this is like. His allies know what this is like. And we felt bad for those youngish staffers who hadn't even really started much on their career. And they were going to be hit, thanks to Liz Cheney and the others, with hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal bills. So we went to our donors and we established a fund as a part of our C3 to help them. So we had helped, I think, dozens of these Trump staffers. And so I think she rightly thought, well, I should get help too. And she tried to spin it that she was going to be an ally.
And with that, how did it unfold from there?
Well, we checked into it as we did with all of these applications or requests. And, we were concerned about whether or not she merited us passing on the largesse of our donors. And I think it was the right judgment because it is clear that she had a bone to pick with Donald Trump. And I think some people saw that as a problem from the very beginning. You know, always the problem with the Trump presidency is the president was open in allowing young people and other people to join his administration who told him they were going to be for his agenda. They got in under the tent, Lou, and we saw dozens of examples of this. And when they got power, they used that power to work with the corrupt swamp to try to bring him down. And that's what the whole J6 committee charade was about.
And indeed, there was instance after instance of just utterly incredible stories hatched up by the J6 committee and
right.
Some of their so-called witnesses. I don't know of any more strange or stranger than the one about President Trump reaching across the window to get to the driver and put his hands on the wheel. Where in the world did that? Where did that come from? Do you know?
Well, I said that it was hallway gossip. And I think one of the problems with some of these young people that worked for, whether it's Mark Meadows, my wife was obviously there as a senior staffer to President Trump, and she had this experience as well. You had young staffers that would overhear conversations, and by and large, they would then leak it to who they thought were their friends in the press. Even if they were well-meaning, they were naive, and they harmed Donald Trump tremendously, because really a president should control when information flows out of the White House instead of some 20-something staffer who wants to make a buddy at the New York Times or the Washington Post. And that's what happened over and over again. In this case, it's so absurd. I mean, I've been in that beast more than a couple times. It's impossible for any president to somehow get a hold of the steering wheel. By the way, these Secret Service agents, they're pretty big, burly guys. No president of the United States is going to think that they can take them on physically. The whole story just fit the fake narrative that the fake news wanted to portray, was somehow Donald Trump had lost his mind in the last days and weeks of his administration. And, this fake news problem we have in our society is a toxic thing.
It truly is. And the nexus of that toxicity, if you will, is at the New York Times, the Washington Post, ABC News, NBC News. They will believe anything because it's in their interest to do so.
Lou, do you mind if I jump in on
scurrilous.
that? Do you mind if I jump in on that? I think we have to diagram this even more clearly. You have these left-wing fake news outlets that spend 100% of their time with investigative reporters going after anybody associated with Trump or anybody that's espousing conservative policies. It starts at places like the HuffPost and the Daily Beast. And if you look at these fake reporters, it's 100% of the time with 100% of their stories going after anybody who has anything close to our values. Once that story is written, by the way, almost always with completely anonymous sources, which means, like we said, some 20-something-year-old who doesn't even know what they're talking about, but will be an anonymous source in order to gain some favor in the swamp. Then WAPO, sometimes New York Times, and the rest of these outlets run with it. So when a conservative gets a negative story, they will have 25 negative stories before the sun sets or within 24 hours. And then once you have 20, 25 negative stories, the narrative is set in from all of these directions that, for instance, Donald Trump tried to commandeer the beast, or that Cassidy Hutchinson was like a truth teller in the West Wing when the real truth is that she didn't know anything. She was basically a glorified secretary with nice office space. So, all of these themes that we see, what conservatives have to begin to do is to do something in response. If Clarence Thomas has to wake up every morning and read about what yacht he was on or what vacation he did or did not take, but no left-wing member of the court who's appointed by Democrats ever reads anything but yet a glowing positive story, we will not win these institutional battles. It's time for us to strike back.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And by the way, I think striking back means understanding exactly who started it all. Liz Cheney, Nancy Pelosi, and the cretins just like them who inhabit the halls of Congress and the Senate. I think we know who the, if you will, the perps are. Matt, as always, thanks so much, and thanks for bringing truth as well as leadership to the conservative cause. We appreciate it. Up next, the swamp knows Trump is returning to town after November, so it's already planning on ways to undermine and to frustrate his agenda. Good luck. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris has a warning for America if Trump wins. Ooh, that sounds scary, doesn't it? We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm here to tell you about my new product from MyPillow. Towels that actually work. Watch this absorbency test. Here's another towel that we randomly went out and bought. Here's one of my towels with the nice design. I don't know if you can see this, but you could line a swimming pool with this. I mean, this is crazy. Get rid of it. Towels that actually work. What a concept. I'm interrupting this commercial to let you know you can get our 6-piece My Towels, regular $69.98, now only $29.98. Or you can save 25% on our brand new kitchen towels, made with the same technology as our famous My Towels. Also, we have bath sheets, bath towels, washcloths, hand towels, and so much more. And the best part, with your promo code, your entire order ships absolutely free. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use that promo code to get deep discounts on all My Towels. And for a limited time, your order ships absolutely free.
Welcome back. Joe Biden can't beat Donald Trump outright or likely any other way. The polls now make that abundantly clear. So as we've witnessed for the past 4 years, the Marxist Dems are doing everything they can to take down Donald Trump. They are subverting the very democracy they claim to defend. Joe Biden has corrupted law enforcement to arrest and to imprison his chief rival ahead of the election. Corrupt trials, baseless charges, all trying to get him off the ballot any way they can. These are the same dark forces that concocted the Russian collusion hoax, the dangerous conspiracy that nearly brought down a sitting president. Many of the perpetrators of that conspiracy were not held to account, haven't been, and won't likely be. In fact, they were rewarded with lucrative cable news contracts. People like John Brennan, Andy McCabe, Andrew Weissman, nasty souls, and they now use that platform to telegraph their next act of subversion. Former CIA Director John Brennan himself bragging on MSNBC last week, bragging that the intelligence community would give President Trump watered-down national security briefings. In other words, the deep state is animated and will work tirelessly to undermine the potential of the next president of the United States. And yet, despite all of this, according to none other than Vice President Kamala Harris, Trump is the one who is trying to weaponize the Department of Justice. Here she is yesterday.
And that is not all. If he is reelected, the former president has openly said he intends to weaponize the Department of Justice against his enemies.
And that is exactly what, of course, the Marxist Dems are doing right now. Talk about projection. And we do. They are fearful of being held to account. And Matt Taibbi is an independent journalist of great distinction, and I think it's safe to say world renowned. And he joins us now with his reaction to all that is happening in this great constitutional republic of ours. Matt, welcome, and we thank you for being with us. Well, what do you make of this moment in history? You've gone through the Twitter files. You have, throughout your career, taken on enormous stories. And right now, at this very moment, what are you thinking as a journalist about your next story?
First of all, Mr. Dobbs, thanks so much for having me on. It's an honor. As a journalist, I think we probably think similarly about this. I think this is a moment of great import for the American media. Unfortunately, they seem deeply disinterested in the story. The developing story that you outlined is that we've had this incredible incursion by the American intelligence services into communications platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Google, Instagram, TikTok, you know it. On and on. And the idea that the state will have some form of control over what people can and cannot see, which is a violation of the first promise of the Constitution, is now more or less becoming reality. I mean, this new idea about banning TikTok contains provisions that would give the president more or less unilateral power to remove websites, apps, platforms at will, just by citing national security concerns. This is sort of the worst case scenario that a lot of people imagined after 9/11, and those people were dismissed as lunatics and hysterics. But it's becoming reality. The United States is developing into a surveillance state on par with some of the more repressive regimes in the past, including the Soviet Union, where I studied, believe it or not, as a teenager.
Right. I can recall you doing just that. And I also recall vividly thinking as myself a product of the 60s, that I would never trust government again after 1971 and the Pentagon Papers, never again after the Nixon impeachment, never again. And yet here we are repeating the same sins of acquiescence to the state. And when you say TikTok, TikTok is not a truth teller per se. And I take your point. Truth tellers seldom collect data and intel from 170,000 users in this country and wad it all up and ship it off to the People's Republic of China, to the CCP, the PLA. How do we draw an important distinction between what is truth-telling and what is surveillance?
Well, I think, from my point of view, the ban, the so-called TikTok ban, which is actually a law called the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, it's really not even about TikTok. Yes, in this specific instance, They are targeting a foreign-owned platform, a communist-owned communications platform that has extraordinary popularity around the world. It has 150 million users in the United States. And yes, they are collecting all sorts of information about all of their users, including things like geolocation and your spending habits, where you bank, what kind of sites you surf. And that poses a tremendous danger. It's a real security risk. Unfortunately, there are two problems here. One is that all the platforms do exactly the same thing. We know this. It's been admitted that we're also the United States. The Pentagon is collecting geolocation, buying the same kinds of data from the other platforms. But more importantly, there is a provision in this bill that would give the executive branch basically unlimited, unrestricted ability to look at other platforms and other websites and other applications and remove them at will, as long as they have a cited national security concern. And so that's why, yes, TikTok, I think, presents a complicated issue for people, but the problem is giving the executive branch so much power when we've already seen so much abuse.
Right. And I would agree with you if I did not think that the executive branch already had that power and was already abusing it and doing so with extraordinary energy. Just as TikTok is doing what we described for 150 to 170 million Americans, we know that Facebook is doing precisely the same thing, and perhaps in every bit as nefarious a manner. But that doesn't eliminate the necessity of dealing with the reality that is Facebook, as well as the reality that is TikTok. We have young minds and hearts that are being enfeebled by social media every day. We still haven't had a significant public hearing on it before our Congress, our Senate. But we have had the creation of truth ministries by the Biden administration, whether it be at the Homeland Security Department or the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Committee at DHS, whether it be the CIA, whether it be the NSA. We know full well they are surveilling us every day in every way, not just through FISA and not just through warrantless wiretaps. They are picking the bone clean, if you will, in terms of gathering our personal data, information, and making as much of it as they want for their purposes as they want. Your thoughts about where we go from here?
I mean, it's very difficult to say. That there is an extremely important Supreme Court case that's where oral arguments are going to begin on Monday. It's called Missouri v. Biden. Right. And this is a case that, I'm very pleased to see happen. The Twitter files that I worked on had a role in helping this lawsuit go forward. But basically, the Supreme Court is going to judge whether or not the executive branch has the right to have a formal system of recommendations about content with companies like Facebook, Twitter, Google, and Instagram, and so on. Essentially, whether state-sponsored censorship can be allowed, and I think that's a critical issue. That Supreme Court case is extraordinarily important. But Lou, I think the thing you mentioned before, growing up and coming from the '60s and not trusting government, and the experience of the Pentagon Papers, and then Watergate. I remember, if I remember correctly, in 1975, there was also the family jewel story that Cy Hirsch did, where they're unearthing the CIA program. This used to be a streak that ran through the media, this pervasive sort of reflexive distrust of government, and not being willing to accept surveillance, censorship, any of those things as being normal. What's been so interesting in the last 8 years is to see the media completely change its mind about this issue. I think it has a lot to do with Donald Trump. Once Trump got elected, you see all these people who were raised as ACLU liberals, and like me, I'm one of the only ones left in media who still believes in the First Amendment. I mean, the traditional belief in media is that we trust our citizens to figure out what is correct and what is not by giving them access to everything and saying, hey, you're adults, you work it out. We'll do our part by telling you the truth as best we can. You do your part by judging it and voting. But that compact has been broken. and the media does not trust citizens anymore, and the government does not trust citizens anymore. And we have to repair that somehow, because I think it's a great system what we had. The way it was designed, the American system is unique and beautiful, and we're losing it.
And I would only argue that we've lost it. And I don't mean to be cynical in that, but the reality is that the enormous power of the state has been brought to bear against every citizen's right to know, the citizen's right to express themselves through the First Amendment. We can go on. But I'd like to continue this conversation. I think it's an important one, Matt. I would love to have you come back from time to time, frequently, to discuss these issues and sort of take the temperature, if you will, of the body politic and the state of the Constitution that seems a bit tattered these days. What say you?
I do think it's tattered. I think it's quite sad, actually. I mean, I remember after 9/11, there was enormous political energy, both on the left and the right. There was concern about what's going to happen to the Constitution during the War on Terror, because there were all sorts of changes about the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment, and all energy is gone. We have an apathetic population that is watching wholesale changes to how we do things and kind of shrugging their shoulders. And I just don't know what we do. I'm curious to know what you think. How do we get the public to be concerned about, these sort of basic tenets of American civilization? I don't know what we do to get that back.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we take that up at our next conversation in a matter of days or perhaps a couple of weeks, if whatever works for you. We'd love to have you back to continue the conversation. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you'll join us each and every day for, Lou Dobbs Tonight, and certainly my podcast, The Great America Show, as well, available wherever you get your podcasts. We thank you for being with us tonight, and we'll keep you posted on whether Matt Taibbi and I can continue this conversation. I certainly hope so. Join us here tomorrow, 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central. And for all of those in a certain age group, remember the 60s, not a lot has improved since. The Lindell Report is next. Don't miss it. God bless you, and good night.
To celebrate the new year, we're having the biggest sale ever on overstock clearance